Hi there. My name is Emma, and I'm 36 years old. For as long as I can remember, my parents have always thought highly of me. Mom used to exclaim, "Emma, you're such a gem," her eyes glistening with joy. My art and academic prizes displayed in our little living room were proof of their devotion. One evening, when our living room was drenched in the golden colors of sunset, my younger sister Sophie was setting the table as I cuddled up with a book. The silence was only broken by the delicate clinks of silverware. Mom said, "Sophie, be careful with that," coming from the kitchen. "Don't chip the china like last time." With a little sigh trailing from her mouth, Sophie rolled her eyes. "It was just a small chip, Mom. It's not like I broke the whole set." As she adjusted the plates, I saw a tiny quiver in her hands as I glanced up. "Sophie, don't worry, I'll assist you," I said, putting down my book. She smiled weakly at me. "Thanks, Em. You always know how to make things better." With pride in his voice, Dad entered the room and looked about before settling on me. "Emma, your art teacher called today. Another masterpiece, eh?" he said. I nodded, feeling a tinge of unease. "It's just a drawing, Dad." His eyes flickered to Sophie and he argued, "No, Emma, it's more than that. You have a gift. Why don't you try something like this, Soph? It'd be nice to see you both excel." Sophie smiled erratically. "I'm more into sports, Dad. Remember the volleyball team I joined?" Dad responded, hardly concealing his favoritism. "Ah, yes, sports. But Emma's achievements are something else, aren't they?" The atmosphere became heavy with suppressed hopes and unsaid words. That evening, dinner was a low-key affair, with a detailed discussion of my alleged accomplishments and a cursory mention of Sophie's sporting and academic achievements. It was the moment I really understood how hard Sophie was trying to get our parents to pay attention. It was a cool fall evening, the sort when the leaves make the earth red and the air seems to be getting closer to winter. Sophie had just returned home, enthusiasm visible on her face. She held a letter in her shaky hands and cried, "Mom, Dad, I made the volleyball team." I lifted my eyes from my book and saw our parents hardly look up from their work. Mom was crocheting me something, as usual, and Dad was deep in his newspaper. Mom remarked, "That's nice, dear," without even glancing at Sophie. Sophie's voice was a mixture of pride and a cry for acknowledgement. "But Mom, it's the varsity team. Coach says I have potential." When Dad did glance up, his eyes met Sophie's for a little moment. "Good for you, Sophie. Just make sure it doesn't affect your grades." Sophie's dismay was evident on her face. Her eyes lost brightness and her shoulders drooped. Too often I'd seen this pattern. Sophie would do something amazing, then be treated with disinterest. Sophie was looking out the window in our room when I discovered her later that evening, shouting more to herself than to me. "They don't even care," she said. Not knowing what to say, I sat next to her. "Sophie, I'm proud of you. Making the team is a big deal." She turned to face me, tears still welling up in her eyes. "But why isn't it a big deal to them? What do I have to do to make them see me, Emma?" I extended my hand and grasped hers. "I don't know, Soph, but I see you. I see how hard you're trying." "It's never enough for them." She gripped my hand and said to herself, "No matter what I do, it's like I'm invisible unless I'm doing something wrong." I wanted to refute her and tell her that she was mistaken, but the reality made my mouth water. I had been oblivious to our parents' favoritism for far too long. "Sophie, you're amazing, with or without their approval. You're strong, talented, and kind. Don't let their indifference define you." We sat in quiet, the weight of unsaid truths thick in the air, as she rested her head on my shoulder. Even if our parents weren't there for her, I vowed to support her. I was resolved to provide Sophie with the support she needed, no matter the cost. The unfairness of all this had been boiling under the surface for years when it finally hit me, but it was one evening that it struck me particularly hard. Sitting in our childhood living room with Sophie, the aroma of Mom's lemon pie filled the air. I had a rare weekend off from my busy routine at home from college. Sophie, a senior in high school, was displaying her most recent collection of prizes to her parents, which included both athletics and academic honors. Mom was not paying much attention, as usual. She glanced through a magazine and muttered absently, "That's nice, darling." Dad grunted noncommittally, his eyes fixed on the television. Sophie gently put the trophies back in her purse, and I saw her grin fade from her face. Watching her seem so hopeless was like a punch to the body. I nervously said, "Sophie, you did really well. I'm proud of you." She dismissed my compliments with a shrug. "Doesn't matter. They don't care." That's when it really struck me, the years of being ignored and the extent of her anguish. I had a wave of shame combined with protectiveness. Why hadn't I seen it before? "Do you know how hard Sophie works? She's incredible at what she does," I added, sounding tougher than I meant to. "Mom, Dad." Mom glanced up, her face showing a hint of astonishment. "Of course we know, Emma. We're proud of both our girls." "But you never show it," I had to say, speaking up. "Sophie deserves your attention just as much as I do, if not more." Dad's gaze was harsh when he eventually switched off the TV. "Emma, that's enough. We treat you both equally." Sophie laughed hysterically. "Right, equally. That's a joke." "Girls, please," Mom said in an attempt to defuse the situation. "We love you both the same." I shook my head, my annoyance exploding. Love isn't just a word. It's in your actions, and your actions have always favored me. It's not fair, and it's hurting Sophie. With a mixture of astonishment and thankfulness in her eyes, Sophie turned to face me at that moment. "Emma." I turned to face her and grasped her hands. "Sophie, I see you. I see how hard you try, and I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner." Her eyes were filled with tears. "I just wanted them to see me, to really see me." With a knot of emotions in my chest, I gave her a firm embrace. "I see you, Sophie. I always will. I promised to always be there for Sophie. Although I was unable to alter our parents, I could alter the way I helped my sister." As I made my way through the challenges of maturity, I became more conscious of the unfairness Sophie had to grow up with, and it began to weigh hard on my conscience. This internal conflict coincided with my first day of work, which opened a new chapter in my life of independence and self-discovery. It was there that I met Jack, a colleague who would later become extremely significant to me. I recall feeling a knot in my gut from excitement and nervousness as I entered the workplace for the first time. I met Jack there, between the clack of keyboards and the buzz of printers. He held out a hand and questioned, "Emma, right?" His grin seeming too wide for the space. "I'm Jack, your mentor. Welcome aboard." His enthusiasm was contagious, albeit it was a little too much for my more timid disposition. Attempting to match his passion, I shook his hand. "Thank you, Jack. It's nice to meet you." Jack took it upon himself to give me a tour of the area, moving quickly and spewing forth useful advice and office lore. I tried to take it all in while nodding and listening. As we passed a row of cubicles, he said, "So, Emma, what brings you into this wild world of ours?" I paused, trying to think of the right words to describe my goals. I've always been drawn to the intricacies of our field. The challenge of it, I suppose. His chuckle seemed to fill the workplace with sunshine. "You'll fit right in. We love a good challenge here. And speaking of challenges, how do you feel about joining me and a few others for lunch? It's a great way to dive into the office culture." I was ready to say no, that I would much rather read alone on my lunch break, but something in his serious eyes convinced me otherwise. "Yes, that sounds good," I said. The light-hearted chat and introductions over lunch with Jack and the others passed very quickly. Jack's easygoing demeanor with everyone around him gradually made me smile more than normal. Jack started to become a regular fixture in my life. His endless enthusiasm was often overbearing, yet there was something really endearing about his zest for life. Late one evening, Jack poked his head into my cubicle as I sat there buried by a pile of papers. "Still here, Emma. You really are dedicated." I rubbed my eyes as I glanced up. With a hint of humor, I responded, "Just trying to keep up." His face became serious as he leaned against the wall. You know, it's important to find a balance. All work and no play. I arched an eyebrow. Are you suggesting I don't have a life outside of these walls? Jack signaled a feigned surrender by raising his hands. Not at all. I just think you could use a break sometimes. How about grabbing a coffee with me? My treat. I gave his offer some thought. It was tempting to go away from the desk, even for a little while. All right, coffee seems delicious, I gave in. The discussion flowed naturally as we sipped our beverages in the quiet cafe. I discovered that, while Jack spoke about his exciting weekends and passion for outdoor sports, I was expressing my love of literature and peaceful nights. I never thought you were the adventurous type, I said, sounding a little amused. He smiled. There's a lot more to me than meets the eye, Emma, and I could say the same about you. Jack had a way of dissecting my closed-off exterior and encouraging me to let a little bit of myself out. The workplace became more than simply a place of employment. As our connection grew and my career took off, it also provided a foundation for our budding relationship. However, in the middle of this career triumph, the distant echoes of familial connections called for reconciliation, which resulted in a moving reunion with Sophie after years of tense quiet. I hadn't seen Sophie in more than a year. I had a range of feelings leading up to our reunion: optimism, fear, and a desire for the sisterly bond that had been absent for so long. The moment I stepped into our parents' home, I was surrounded by noises and scents I knew well. Before I saw Sophie, I heard her. Her voice, which had previously been lively and expressive, now sounded tired. With a simple "Emma," she met my gaze. Her protective barrier, erected over years of pain, was evident in the guardedness of her eyes. "Sophie," I said, scarcely raising my voice above a whisper. I hesitantly moved closer, not knowing how to close the distance that had opened up between us. We were surrounded by recollections of a childhood that seemed both terribly near and far away as we stood there in the living room where we had spent our formative years. Sophie broke the quiet, saying, "Mom and Dad told me you were coming. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see you or not." Her candor hurt, but it was a pain I had expected. "I comprehend," I said. "It's indescribable how difficult it must have been for you to feel so ignored." Sophie chuckled bitterly. "Disregarded? Emma, that is really an understatement. Except when I was making problems or bringing home awards, it seemed as if I was invisible. Feeling the weight of my own guilt, I swallowed hard. I was so engrossed in my own universe that I was blind to the reality around me. Perhaps I just didn't want to see it." We both became quiet, regrets and unsaid apologies filling the air. Then, after inhaling deeply, I apologized to Sophie for failing to support you and defend yourself. Sophie's eyes softened a little, giving me a glimpse of the sister I used to know. "Emma, you were the ideal person at all times, the successful sister, the excellent daughter, and I was only Sophie. To me, you were never just Sophie," I said, my voice brimming with passion. "You were the one I ought to have supported and shielded, my little sister." Sophie seemed as if she would weep for a brief while before gathering herself. "Isn't it a little late for that now?" "Perhaps," I conceded. "However, there is still time to attempt to put things right." Sophie looked at me for a long time, as if considering what I had said. At last, she gave a hesitant nod. "Perhaps, Emma, it's going to need more than simply an apology." "I am aware," I said, "and I'm here, prepared to take on any task." Something changed between us after he spoke those words. Although it wasn't a full reunion, it was a beginning and a modest move in the right direction toward mending the gulf that had developed over time. It wouldn't be simple to mend my connection with Sophie, but I was prepared to go on the road. I had the feeling that we could really be able to reconnect for the first time in a very long time. Jack and I strengthened our relationship throughout the happy time that followed our reunion and helped us walk down the aisle into a happy marriage that soon flourished with the birth of our darling children. This period of love and family life full of laughter and aspirations in common, stood in sharp contrast to the chaos that would soon break out and rock the very foundations of our existence. With the light shining through the curtains and creating a pleasant glow over my ideal existence, I can still recall that day, as if it were yesterday. Our children's laughter filled our house as Jack and I just celebrated our 3rd anniversary. However, my whole life fell apart on that day. With an uncharacteristically rapid voice, Jack yelled out, "I'm just stepping out for a bit." Although he had always been a kind spouse, there had been a little change in his attitude lately. I said, supporting our youngest on my hip, "Sure, love. Will you be back for dinner?" He paused without looking directly into my eyes. "Not sure. Don't wait up." With a gentle click, the door closed, and the corridors became silent. I ignored my nagging feeling of uneasiness and concentrated on the children. I was alone myself in the peaceful home later that night, after putting the kids to bed. Jack hadn't come back, and his phone dropped a voicemail. I started cleaning up to attempt to divert my attention when I started to get restless. That's when I discovered it, a slip of paper concealed behind a pile of books. It was a 2-day-old receipt for a jewelry that I had never received. Doubt and confusion filled my thoughts. I spoke with Jack the next morning. "What is this, Jack? Who is the necklace for?" With a hint of shame in his eyes, he glanced at me. "Emma, it's not what you think. It's for a client." "A client? Since when do we buy expensive jewelry for clients?" I said with a harsh tone, making it clear that I was hurting. He tried to comfort me with a touch and murmured, "Emma, please. You're overreacting." But I swiftly dismissed him. I recall pacing around the living room as a tornado of hurt, bewilderment, and rage raked through my head. The sound of the doorbell pierced my daydream. It was Jack, going home without realizing his secret had been revealed. Jack enthusiastically said, "Hey, Emma, I'm home," as he walked in, unaware of the tempest that was building inside of me. With my voice almost audible, I turned to face him and said, "Jack, we need to talk." When he realized how serious I was, his grin wavered. "What's wrong?" he inquired as he shut the door. With shaky hands, I held out the red lace panties I had discovered. "Is there something you want to tell me, Jack?" With a colorless face, he stumbled. "Emma, I can explain." I raised my voice and repeated, "Explain? Explain how you betrayed our family? How you destroyed everything we built together?" Jack looked all about, looking for an escape that did not exist. "It's not what you think. It just happened. I never meant to hurt you." I gave a sour chuckle. "It just happened? You make it sound like an accident, but betraying your wife, my sister, that's a choice, Jack." I drew back as he tried to reach out to me. Don't you dare touch me. How could you do this to us? To our children?" Jack's expression twisted into a regretful and guilty one. "I'm sorry, Emma. I never wanted to lose you." I said, "Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it. You've torn our family apart." A long, heavy hush fell. Then I heard footsteps, very faintly. Sophie was there, standing at the doorway with swollen red eyes. "Emma, I'm so sorry," Sophie stammered out of her speech. I turned to face her, treachery tearing at my heart. "How could you, Sophie? After everything, how could you betray me like this?" With a hunched-over shoulders, Sophie said, "I was so lost, Emma. I thought he loved me, that he could give me the life I always wanted." "You wanted my life?" I questioned, my voice laced with grief and astonishment. "You destroyed your own sister's life for a fantasy?" Sophie remarked. "I know I can't undo what I've done," as tears fell down her cheeks. "But I regret it. Every single day." Between Jack and Sophie, the two persons I had trusted the most, and who were now the cause of my greatest suffering, I cast my gaze. I responded calmly but firmly, "Get out." "Emma, please," Jack begged. I yelled, "Get out!" as my voice reverberated throughout the home. "Both of you, just leave." They went without saying anything more, leaving me alone myself in my ruined home's terrible stillness. I collapsed to the ground, my body aching under the weight of my broken world. After Jack's treachery, I was left to cobble together a life destroyed by deceit in a labyrinth of pain and despair. Patricia's kind bequest, a sign of her trust in me and a turning point on my road to recovery and independence, materialized out of nowhere in the middle of all of this chaos. Jack's mother, Patricia, was someone I got to know as much more than just my mother-in-law. Her sudden bequest was a last gesture of love and trust in my character and fortitude. She was a lovely and compassionate lady who showed me support and care, particularly during difficult moments in my connection with her son. The living room seemed so frigid, but now it was warm, lit by the early light as I stood there. With a combination of worry and optimism in her eyes, my mother sat across from me. It was a quiet voice. "Emma, you've been through so much, but you're handling everything with such strength." Feeling the weight of her words, I smiled faintly. "It's not easy, Mom. After everything with Jack and Sophie, I just feel so betrayed." There was a silent, understanding-filled moment. The recollections of the recent past, the pain and the healing that had consumed our lives, hung heavily in the air. "But you know," I said, "Patricia's inheritance. It's given me a new perspective. It's like she's still here, guiding me." My mother reached over and covered my hand. "She always saw the best in you, Emma, and she was right. You are strong, capable of so much more than you realize." I gripped her hand tightly, taking courage from her presence. "I need to use this money wisely, for the boys, for their future, and I want to do something meaningful, something that would make Patricia proud." My mother reassured me. "You will, darling. You always make the right choices." Her confidence in me shone like a light amid the shadows I had to cross. The silence was broken just then by the sound of the phone ringing. My pulse pounded with a combination of fear and eagerness as I got up to respond to it. "Hello?" The voice on the other end said, "Emma, it's Jack." A voice I had once adored but could not even recognize anymore. I steadied myself by inhaling deeply. "What do you want, Jack?" He replied. "I heard about the inheritance," in a desperate tone that I had never heard in his voice. "Emma, we need to talk. That money, it's not just yours. It's ours." I felt an influx of rage and said, "Ours? After everything you've done? You have some nerve, Jack?" "Emma, please, just hear me out. I'm not the villain you think I am. I made mistakes, but that money could help us both." My mother's eyes were on me, and I could feel her unspoken encouragement. "There is no us anymore, Jack. And that money was left to me by Patricia, not you. You're not entitled to a single cent. Emma, don't do this. Think about the boys. Think about what this could mean for their future." The thought of my boys strengthened my resolve. "I am thinking about them, which is why I won't let you take what Patricia intended for us. For me and the boys. Goodbye, Jack." A feeling of strength swept over me as I hung up the phone. I turned to look at my mother. Pride and adoration were evident in her eyes. "Emma, you made the right decision," she firmly said. I nodded, filled with a renewed sense of resolve. "It's time to rebuild, Mom. For me, for the boys. We're going to be just fine." And I believed it more than ever at that very time. I never thought that after everything, Jack would surge back into my life, determined to get her hands on the $850,000 that his mother, Patricia, had left for me. My attorney, Mr. Davis, called me early on a Thursday morning. Mr. Davis said in a calm voice, "Emma, Jack is contesting the will. He claims he's entitled to the inheritance." But I could see how serious things were. I let out a long sigh as a knot in my gut appeared. He can't be serious. Patricia made her wishes clear. I was absorbed with the court struggle in the days that followed. With Mr. Davis, I had lengthy conversations about strategy while scouring through legal paperwork that appeared to be made up of endless words. My mother, who has always been my source of strength, supported me. "Emma, you know Patricia wanted this for you and the boys. she said to me one night as we were sitting in my living room with a pile of papers in front of us. I know, Mom, but it's not just about the money. It's about honoring Patricia's memory, her wishes. The court hearing day finally came. The courtroom was massive, the footfall of individuals seeking justice resonating through its walls. I saw a confident-looking Jack inside the courtroom. My rage sprang up again at the sight of him. The first to speak was Mr. Davis, who did so in a straightforward and succinct manner. Your Honor, Patricia's will explicitly states her intention to leave the inheritance to Emma and her children. Jack's claim lacks any legal or moral foundation. Next, it was Jack's attorney's time. Your Honor, as Patricia's only son, Jack naturally expected to be included in the will. We believe the exclusion is an oversight. I felt an overwhelming wave of fury and balled my fists. How could he so obviously distort the truth? It was now my chance to talk. My pulse raced, but my voice remained firm as I stood before the judge. Your Honor, Patricia was more than a mother-in-law to me. She was a mentor, a friend. Her decision to leave the inheritance to me was based on our deep bond and mutual respect. Jack's claim is not just legally unfounded, it goes against everything Patricia stood for. The judge listened carefully, his face too expressionless to decipher. It felt like an age before he talked at all. After reviewing the evidence and testimonies, I find in favor of Emma. The will stands as written. I felt a rush of relief sweep over me. Jack was astounded, his air of confidence broken. A feeling of vindication swept over me as I left the courtroom. I had defended Patricia's desires and what was morally correct. I told my mother the news that evening when I got home. We won, Mom. Patricia's wishes will be honored. She gave me a strong embrace while shedding happy tears. I'm so proud of you, Emma. You've shown such strength. That night, as I tucked my boys into bed, I considered the future while seeing their contented expressions. Our lives and their education would be guaranteed by the bequest. But more significantly, I had stood up for the heritage of a lady who had supported me even when I found it difficult to trust in myself. After many months after the court's ruling, things were at last returning to a calm routine. With a happy expression, my younger son, Alex, raced into the room and said, "Mom, look what I made at school today." I turned to face him, grinning, and put down my cup. He produced a lively sketch of our family, complete with beaming faces and holding hands, saying, "Let's see, sweetheart." "This is wonderful, Alex. You've captured us perfectly." With a proud but kind face, my mother entered. "Emma, you've done such an amazing job with these boys. They're growing up so strong and kind, just like their mother." My heart began to shine warmly. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without your support." When the doorbell rang, I answered it. Aunt Mary, Patricia's sister, who had shown unwavering resilience throughout the recent hardships, was standing there. "Hey, Emma, how are you doing?" she said, throwing her arms around me. "I just wanted to make sure everyone was okay." I ushered her into the living room where my mother and boys were, saying, "We're doing well, Aunt Mary. Please, come in." The boys joyfully showed Aunt Mary their most recent school efforts, while the room was filled with pleasant conversation. The talk became more serious as we sat down. "Emma, I know these past months have been challenging, but you've handled everything with such grace," remarked Aunt Mary. "Patricia would have been so proud of you." "I miss her every day," I said, my voice tinged with melancholy. "But I feel like she's still guiding me, helping me make the right choices for my family." With a nod, my mother squeezed my hand gently. "You've come so far, Emma. Remember, you're not just surviving, you're thriving." Sensing my change in disposition, the boys walked up and gave me hugs, saying, "We love you, Mom," in unison. My eyes filled with tears. "I love you, too, more than anything." Aunt Mary gave a kind grin. "You've built a beautiful life here, Emma. It's a testament to your strength and love." I felt hopeful and satisfied as I turned to face my family. I may have faced some dark times, but they've brought me here, to this moment, surrounded by love. I'm ready for whatever the future holds. Once again, laughter and discussion filled the room, as the difficulties of the past gradually gave way to a tale of success and resiliency. I was certain that we would overcome whatever was ahead as a family, stronger and more together than before.